The sun was setting behind the sharp mountains, painting the alien sky in colors of red and silver. A lone human traveler, Ethan, walked along the riverbank, his boots heavy with dust. He had been wandering this strange planet for days, searching for safe ground and maybe some food. The air smelled different here, full of minerals and strange flowers. But it was the river that caught his eye. The water was wide and wild, moving faster than any river he had seen on Earth. It shimmered with a strange glow, like liquid glass under the fading light. He stopped for a moment, listening to the roaring current, when suddenly he heard a cry. It was not the cry of an animal, not the sound of wind, but the voice of someone in trouble. Ethan's eyes focused, and then he saw her in the middle of the river. A figure struggled against the deadly current. Her long hair, silver like threads of moonlight, whipped around her face as she fought the waves. Her hands splashed desperately. Her voice cracked with fear. She was drowning, and the water showed no mercy. Ethan did not think twice. He dropped his bag, tore off his heavy jacket, and ran into the river. The cold water hit him like ice, pulling at his body, trying to drag him under. He pushed forward, fighting each step, the current stronger than chains around his legs. His breath grew short, but he kept moving toward her. The alien woman's eyes met his for a brief moment, wide with shock, as if she did not believe he would risk his life for her. Her arms flailed, her strength fading, and her head dipped below the surface. "No!" Ethan shouted. Diving under the rushing water, he reached for her, his hands brushing her arm. Then gripping tightly, he pulled her upward with all the force he had, breaking the surface with a gasp of air. She coughed, water spilling from her lips. Her body trembled, weak in his arms. He wrapped one arm around her chest, kicking against the current, forcing them both toward the shore. The river fought him, pulling, dragging, as if it wanted to claim them both, but Ethan's will was iron. And inch by inch he pushed forward. At last, his feet found the rocky ground near the edge. With one final effort, he dragged her onto the shore and collapsed beside her, his chest heaving. For a long moment, only the sound of their ragged breaths and the roaring river filled the air. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. They were glowing blue, brighter than any human eyes could ever be, filled with shock and confusion. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice musical but trembling. Ethan nodded, still gasping for breath. "Couldn't let you drown," he said simply, before she could speak again. Shadows moved around them. Figures stepped from the trees, tall and strong, their skin marked with strange glowing patterns. They carried long spears that shimmered in the dim light. The woman's people. They had witnessed everything. Their faces were filled with awe, but also anger. They spoke in their own tongue, harsh sounds mixed with words Ethan could not understand. But their eyes told the story clearly. They were not sure if he was friend or enemy. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward, his voice deep and commanding. He pointed at Ethan, then at the woman, then spoke words that made her eyes widen even more. She sat up, weak but determined. Her gaze locked on Ethan. Her lips trembled as she translated the words. "By sacred law," she whispered, "you saved my life. And now I belong to you." Ethan froze, not sure he had heard correctly. The other warriors slammed their spears into the ground, repeating the same words in unison. The sound echoed like thunder across the riverbank. The woman lowered her eyes, torn between fear and duty, and Ethan, still catching his breath, realized his simple act of rescue had just pulled him into something far greater than he could understand. The night air grew heavy, silence falling after the chant of the clan. The alien woman looked at him again, her expression filled with questions, fear, and something else he could not name. He felt the weight of many eyes on him, the pressure of an ancient law he did not know. And in that moment, he understood this was no ordinary rescue. This was the beginning of a bond that would change his life forever. The night grew darker as the river roared behind them. Ethan stood on the rocky shore, water dripping from his clothes, his heart still racing from the rescue. The alien woman beside him shivered. not only from the cold, but from the weight of her people's words. The warriors circled closer, their glowing markings flickering like fireflies in the moonlight. Ethan could not understand their language, but he understood their eyes. Some looked at him with respect, others with suspicion, and some with pure anger. The tall warrior who had spoken before raised his spear high, chanting words that echoed across the valley. The clan responded, pounding the ground with their weapons, their voices shaking the night air. The alien woman finally found her voice, her lips trembling as she turned to Ethan. "They say, by sacred law, I belong to you now," she whispered. Her voice was soft but heavy, each word carrying centuries of tradition. Ethan blinked, struggling to understand. "Belong? What do you mean?" he asked. She lowered her gaze, as if ashamed. "In my people's law, when one life is saved, a bond is made. It cannot be broken. It is stronger than family, stronger than any oath." Ethan's heart pounded harder than before. He had only wanted to save her life, nothing more. But now he was caught in a chain of ancient rules, a web of customs he could not escape. The woman's eyes shone with conflict, as if she wanted to argue, yet dared not. The clan's leader stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over Ethan. He spoke again in their language, the words sharp like a blade. The woman translated with a quiet voice. "He says you must come with us. He says the law is clear. I must walk with you now, and you must walk with me." Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "I don't want to take you away from your people." Her expression hardened. "It is not a choice. Not for me, not for you. The law is above all." The crowd murmured, some voices rising in protest. Ethan could feel the tension like a storm waiting to break. A younger warrior stepped forward, his eyes burning with rage. He shouted words that needed no translation, his hand pointing at Ethan with fury. The alien woman flinched, then whispered, "He says no outsider should claim me. He says you are unworthy." The young warrior's challenge sparked the others, some nodding, some growling. Ethan realized he was standing in the middle of a tribe divided, half bound by the law, half ready to kill him for it. The woman raised her hands, trying to calm them, but her voice was drowned by the growing roar of the clan. Then the leader struck his spear against the ground, silencing the crowd. His voice was thunder, commanding and absolute. The woman translated in a trembling tone. "He says the law cannot be broken, but if there is doubt, you must prove yourself worthy to walk beside me." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Prove myself? How?" She swallowed hard. "There will be a council. They will decide. But before that, the warriors will test you." Her words struck him like a wave of cold water. Ethan was no stranger to survival. He had fought storms, hunger, and danger before, but this was different. This was not nature he had to face, but people bound by pride, by sacred customs, and by a hatred of outsiders. The young warrior stepped closer, his spear gleaming, his eyes locked on Ethan with deadly promise. Ethan felt his own body tense, ready for a fight he had not asked for. The alien woman moved between them, raising her hand to stop the young warrior. Her voice cut through the night, clear and strong. She spoke to her clan in their language, her words sharp, her tone commanding respect. Though Ethan could not understand, he could feel the weight of her plea. At last the young warrior pulled back, his anger still burning, but his spear lowered. She turned back to Ethan, her voice softer now. "You must come with us. The council will gather at dawn. They will decide your fate." Ethan looked at her carefully. "And what about you? What do you want?" Her eyes flickered with pain, her answer caught between duty and truth. "I do not know," she whispered, her gaze drifting away. "But I know the law is unbreakable, and the law says I am yours." The clan began to move, surrounding them both, guiding them back into the forest. The trees towered above, their branches glowing faintly with alien light. The night was alive with strange sounds, but the silence between Ethan and the woman felt louder than anything else. He wanted to speak, to tell her he had not meant to trap her in this fate, but he saw the fear and sorrow in her eyes. and the words caught in his throat. At last, they reached a wide clearing where firelight glowed. Dozens of clan members gathered, watching Ethan with sharp and curious eyes. Some whispered, some scowled, and some looked at him with something like respect. The leader raised his spear again, his voice carrying through the night. The clan repeated his words, their chant echoing with power. The woman leaned closer to Ethan, her voice trembling as she translated. He says the council will meet at sunrise. They will judge you. They will judge me, if you are found unworthy. The law will break with your blood. Ethan's jaw tightened, his heart pounding in his chest. The fire crackled. The clan's eyes burned into him, and the woman sat quietly by his side, her hands clenched in fear. He realized then that the river had not been the greatest danger. The true danger was only beginning, and the sacred law had already tied his fate to hers, with chains he could not break. The night fires burned bright in the clearing, their smoke curling up into the star-filled sky. Ethan sat on one side of the circle, the clan all around him, their eyes sharp and unblinking. He could feel the weight of their judgment even before the council had begun. But what he did not see was the storm building inside the woman he had saved. Her name was Liara, though Ethan had only just learned it when one of the elders spoke it aloud. Liara sat near him, her head lowered, her silver hair falling over her face like a curtain. Inside her chest, her heart raced, not with weakness from the river, but with confusion and fear. She was alive only because of him, and by her people's law that bound her fate to his. Yet in her soul, she was torn apart. Since childhood, Liara had been taught the sacred law. It was the heartbeat of her people, a chain that kept order, respect, and unity. To save a life was to own it, and to be saved was to surrender. The law had never been broken in generations, and no one dared to question it. But now she sat beside an outsider, a human stranger, bound by that same chain. She stole a glance at him. His clothes were torn from the river, his face tired, yet there was a steady strength in his eyes. He had not known their law when he risked his life. She could see that clearly. He had saved her not for gain or glory, but simply because it was right. And that truth unsettled her more than the law itself. Across the fire, the young warrior who had challenged Ethan still glared. His name was Kor, a hunter and fighter, proud and fierce. Liara had known him since childhood. He had always spoken of strength, of tradition, of keeping the clan pure. Now his anger burned, hotter than the flames, his eyes filled with hatred toward the human. She could almost hear his unspoken words. I should have let her drown rather than see her bound to an outsider. Her chest tightened. She did not want to belong to Ethan, not because she despised him, but because she had never imagined her fate tied to anyone at all. She was not ready to surrender her freedom, her choices, her voice. And yet, when she remembered the river, the cold water swallowing her, the fear of death, she remembered his arms pulling her up, his voice breaking through the storm. His will stronger than the current, and part of her, hidden deep inside, whispered that maybe fate had placed him there for a reason. The elders began to speak, their words deep and slow. Like the weight of mountains, they debated in the old tongue, some voices firm, others uncertain. Liara could follow every word, but she chose not to translate for Ethan just yet. She feared what the decision might be. She feared that once spoken, it could never be undone. Her hands trembled on her lap. What would her people think of her if she defended him? Would they call her traitor, weak, blind? But if she stayed silent, what would become of him? The man who saved her life would stand alone, facing judgment without even knowing the rules. Ethan leaned toward her slightly, his voice quiet but steady. What are they saying? He asked, his eyes searching hers. Liara hesitated, then whispered. They argue. Some say the law must be honored. Some say it cannot bind a human. They fear what will happen if it does. His jaw tightened. And you? What do you say? Her breath caught, her heart thundering in her chest. I don't know, she whispered, her voice almost breaking. The firelight danced on her face. And Ethan saw the war inside her. She was not just a prisoner of her people's law, she was a prisoner of her own heart. For the first time in her life, she questioned what she had been told since childhood. She wondered if the law was truly justice, or just chains made by the past. The voices of the elders grew louder, their hands striking the ground for silence. Kor rose to his feet, his anger spilling like fire. His voice booming across the clearing, he spoke of honor, of blood, of keeping outsiders away from their sacred traditions. His words stirred the crowd, many nodding, many snarling in agreement. Liara felt her chest tighten again. His voice was strong, and it threatened to drown out her own. Before she knew it, she stood up. Her voice cut through the night, trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. She spoke to the elders, to the warriors, to her people. She said that the law was sacred, yes, but so was the act of truth. That Ethan had not come for power or for her, that he had risked his life without thought of reward. And if the law demanded his blood, then what justice was there in it? The clan fell silent, their eyes wide, their breaths sharp. Even Ethan looked at her with surprise. Liara had never spoken against tradition before. And now, her voice echoed louder than the fire. Her heart raced with fear, but also with a strange strength she had never known. The elders looked at one another, their faces shadowed in thought. At last, the leader struck his spear into the ground, his voice carrying finality. Liara translated in a whisper that shook her lips. The council will decide at sunrise. And before the sun rises, you must face the trial. Her words hung heavy in the air. Ethan's fate would not be decided by the council alone, but by his courage, by his will to endure the test of the clan. Liara sat down slowly, her heart trembling with the choice she had made. For in defending him, she had not only challenged her people, she had also challenged herself. And deep inside, though she feared it, she knew her life would never again be her own. The night grew long, but no one slept. The clan gathered in a great circle around the fire, waiting for dawn, waiting for the council's word. Ethan sat close to the flames, drying his wet clothes, his mind heavy with questions he could not answer. Beside him, Liara sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the ground, her thoughts a storm. The elders spoke in low voices, their words too old and tangled for Ethan to follow. He could only watch their faces, the way their brows furrowed, the way their hands moved with meaning. Every glance they gave him was sharp, measuring him, as if deciding whether he was a man or a shadow. The fire crackled, the night creatures sang in the forest. But the weight of the moment crushed everything else. At last, the leader of the council raised his hand. The murmurs died, silence falling over the clearing like a heavy blanket. He stood tall, his eyes glowing faintly in the firelight, and spoke words that carried like thunder. Liara's heart tightened. She knew what was coming. She leaned closer to Ethan, her voice trembling as she translated, "They have judged. You cannot walk free unless you prove your worth. The law says the bond exists, but it must be sealed with strength." Ethan narrowed his eyes. Sealed with strength? How? She hesitated, her lips pale. A trial, you must face a warrior in combat. If you win, you are accepted. If you fail. Her words faded, the unspoken truth heavy in the air. If he failed, the bond would end with his death. The clan erupted with shouts, some cheering, some protesting. The young warrior, Kor, rose to his feet, his voice fierce and burning with pride. He shouted words Ethan did not understand, but Liara's face told the story before she spoke. "He claims the right. He will fight you himself," she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at Kor, the firelight reflecting in the warrior's furious eyes. It was clear, this man wanted his blood. The council agreed with a heavy strike of the leader's spear. The trial was set. The rules were old. The judgment unshakable. Liara's hands clenched in her lap, her heart torn in two. She wanted to protect Ethan, yet the law was stronger than her voice, stronger than her fear. The crowd began to chant, their voices rising into the night. They spoke of honor, of tradition, of strength that must be proven before the gods. Their voices echoed through the forest, filling the night with power. Ethan rose slowly to his feet, his shoulders square, his eyes steady. He did not understand their words, but he understood the fire behind them. He turned to Liara and asked quietly, "What happens if I refuse?" Her face went pale. "Then they will kill you before sunrise." Ethan nodded once. "Then I will fight." The decision rippled through the crowd like lightning. Some cheered with approval. Others muttered with anger, but no one could deny the courage in his eyes. Even Kor, though filled with rage, smirked with satisfaction. This was the chance he wanted. The council gave their final word. The trial would begin at sunrise. The warriors carried their spears high, their voices roaring. Once more, then slowly, the crowd began to settle, waiting for the morning to come. Liara sat close to Ethan, her heart heavy, her thoughts tangled like roots. She whispered to him, "You do not understand their ways. Kor is strong, trained since childhood. He knows every weapon, every strike." Ethan looked at her calmly. "I've fought before, not like this, but I faced worse odds." She shook her head. "Strength is not enough. They will test your spirit, your endurance, your heart. If you fail even one, they will not forgive you." Ethan studied her face. "Then I'll have to learn fast." "Tell me what you can," Liara hesitated, fear in her eyes. If she helped him, she risked being seen as betraying her people. But when she remembered him pulling her from the river, his arm wrapped around her as the water tried to swallow them both, she could not stay silent. She leaned closer, whispering the secrets of the trial, the weapons they would use, the tricks her people honored, the rules that must never be broken. Her voice was urgent but soft, a hidden bond forming in the firelight. Hours passed, the stars faded, and the first light of dawn painted the sky. The clan rose as one, their chants filling the air. Kor stood tall, spear in hand, his face hard as stone, his eyes blazing with hunger for victory. Ethan stood opposite him, unarmed at first, until a warrior handed him a simple staff. The wood was heavy, rough in his grip, but it was all he had. The leader of the council stepped between them, his voice echoing through the clearing. He spoke of honor, of the gods who watched, of the law that bound them all. Then he stepped back, raising his spear high. The crowd fell silent, holding their breath. Liara's heart pounded in her chest. Her hands clenched tightly. She wanted to cry out, to stop it, but her voice was trapped in her throat. The leader's spear struck the ground, a sharp crack echoing through the clearing. The trial had begun. Kor lunged forward, his spear flashing like lightning, his roar shaking the air. Ethan raised the staff, blocking the strike with all his strength, the impact jarring his bones. The crowd erupted in shouts, the fire crackled, and the morning sun rose higher. The council's judgment was not just words, it was now a fight for survival. And with every heartbeat, Liara knew the outcome would change all their lives forever. The morning sun rose higher, bathing the clearing in pale gold. The clan stood in a great circle, their chants echoing through the air, their eyes burning with hunger for battle. In the center stood Ethan, a human far from home, clutching the wooden staff given to him. Before him stood Kor, the warrior of the clan, his spear gleaming in the light, his muscles tense with pride and rage. The trial had begun. Kor charged forward first, his feet striking the ground with the rhythm of thunder. He swung his spear low, aiming for Ethan's legs, a strike that could cripple him at once. Ethan barely leapt aside, the blade missing by inches, the wind of it brushing past him. The crowd roared, half cheering, half laughing, for to them this was a contest already won. Ethan steadied his breath, gripping the staff tighter. He had fought before, yes, but never like this, never. Against a warrior born and bred for combat, he had only instinct, only survival. But sometimes survival was stronger than tradition. Kor came again, spear flashing upward toward Ethan's chest. Ethan swung his staff across, blocking, the force of the clash rattling his arms. The sound cracked through the clearing, wood against steel. Kor snarled, pushing harder, forcing Ethan back step by step. The human's boots dug into the dirt, his body straining, his teeth clenched. For a moment it seemed he would break, but Ethan twisted suddenly, letting the spear slide past, and shoved his staff against Kor's shoulder. The warrior stumbled, not falling but surprised. The crowd gasped, their voices rising in shock. Lyra's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had expected Ethan to be crushed, yet here he stood, still fighting, still defying the odds. Her heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and hope. Perhaps he was more than an outsider. Perhaps he was something else. But Kor was not finished. He spun back with a roar, striking faster now, his spear dancing like fire. Each blow came harder, sharper, filled with fury. Ethan blocked what he could, dodged what he could not, his arms aching, his lungs burning. One strike grazed his side, drawing blood, the red stain spreading across his shirt. The crowd shouted louder, some calling for his end, others silent with awe. Ethan stumbled, but his eyes never left Kor. He remembered Lyra's whispered words from the night before. She had told him, "They test not only strength, but spirit. Endure, and you will be seen." He clung to those words like a rope. This was not only about winning. It was about standing when no one believed he could. Kor lunged again, aiming for Ethan's chest. At the last moment, Ethan dropped low, rolling across the dirt. He rose behind Kor and swung the staff with all his weight. It cracked against Kor's back, the sound echoing like a drum. The warrior staggered forward, his body shaking with rage. The crowd gasped again. Some even shouted Ethan's name without meaning to. Lyra's heart leapt, her eyes locked on him. She saw not just a man fighting for his life, but a man who fought with honor, who refused to surrender. Her chest tightened, a strange warmth spreading through her, and yet fear gnawed at her too, because she knew Kor would not allow this insult to stand. The warrior turned, his face twisted with fury. He roared words of challenge, his voice shaking the trees. Lyra whispered the meaning under her breath. "He says he will not fight by the rules. He says he will break you even if it breaks the law." Ethan's chest tightened, but his eyes did not falter. He stood firm, his staff ready, his breath steady. Kor lunged again, this time striking with reckless force. Ethan blocked once, twice. Then the spear slipped past and cut across his arm. Pain burned, blood dripped, yet he did not fall. He pushed forward, staff slamming into Kor's wrist, knocking the spear aside. For one heartbeat, Kor was open, and Ethan struck again, this time across his chest. The warrior stumbled back, gasping, his pride wounded more than his body. The crowd erupted into chaos, some screaming for the fight to end, others demanding it continue. The council's leader raised his hand, shouting for order. But before the trial could be stopped, Kor did the unthinkable. He drew a hidden blade from his belt, sharp and deadly, breaking the sacred rules of the trial. The gasps of the clan filled the air, their voices torn between outrage and silence. Lyra's heart froze, her breath caught in her throat. The trial was meant to test honor, but Kor had shattered it. Ethan saw the blade, his body tensing, his eyes narrowing. This was no longer trial, this was murder. And in that moment, the true weight of the sacred law shifted, because the trial was no longer about strength or spirit, but about truth. The council shouted, but their words were drowned by the roar of the crowd. The fire crackled, the morning sun burned brighter. And in the center of it all, Ethan faced Kor, not as an outsider, not as prey, but as a man who would not yield, a man who would stand even against broken laws. Lyra rose to her feet, her voice trembling as she shouted for him, and in that moment, the fate of the clan hung on the edge of a blade. The hidden blade flashed in the sunlight. Gasps filled the clearing, the clan shouting in outrage, their voices like a storm. The sacred trial was built on honor, on rules older than memory. But Kor had broken it, and everyone knew Ethan's Eyes locked on the blade, his body tense, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. He had already taken wounds, already fought harder than any man should. But now he saw not just a warrior, but a betrayer, a man willing to twist the law. To kill. Kor lunged forward, the blade aimed at Ethan's heart. Ethan twisted, the sharp edge grazing his arm. Blood spilling once again, he swung his staff, striking Kor's wrist. But the warrior's grip was iron. The crowd roared louder, some screaming. For the fight to stop, others too consumed by anger to move. The council's leader raised his spear, shouting commands, but the words drowned in the chaos. Liara's voice rose above it all, sharp and desperate. Stop! He breaks the law. He betrays the trial. But her cries were swallowed by the madness of the moment. Kor struck again, his blade slashing the air. His eyes burning with rage, Ethan dodged, his body heavy, his breath ragged, yet his spirit unbroken. The human staff cracked across Kor's chest, driving him back a step, but still, the warrior advanced, his pride wounded, his fury beyond reason. Liara's heart pounded, her hands trembling as she watched. She could not stay silent, not anymore. Her people had built their world on the sacred law, but if the law was broken from within, what meaning did it have? Her voice rang out again, louder, filled with fire. You dishonor us, Kor. You dishonor the gods themselves. The words struck the crowd like lightning. Many turned their eyes toward her, their faces torn between shock and shame. The leader of the council finally roared, his command cutting through the noise. But even as order began to return, the truth of Kor's betrayal hung heavy in the air. Ethan braced himself for another strike, but before Kor could move, two elders stepped forward, their spears crossing, blocking his path. The crowd gasped, silence falling like a blanket. For elders to interfere in a trial was unthinkable, but the law had already been shattered, and they could not allow the betrayal to stand. Kor snarled, spitting words of defiance. He shouted that the law was weak, that outsiders would corrupt their people. He shouted that Liara was blind, that she belonged to him, not to the human. His voice shook with rage, but beneath it, there was fear of losing power, fear of losing pride. Liara stepped forward, her eyes burning with tears. Her voice shook, but she spoke with courage. No, Kor, I do not belong to you. And I never will. The crowd gasped again, whispers rising like a tide. She turned her gaze to the council, her hands clenched tight. This man saved me, not for reward, not for power, but because it was right. If the law is sacred, then honor him, not the one who betrayed it. Ethan looked at her, his chest still heaving, his blood dripping onto the ground. In her voice, he heard truth, not just duty, but choice. She was no longer speaking as one bound by tradition, but as one breaking free. Her courage filled him with strength. Even as his body trembled from exhaustion, the council murmured among themselves, the leader's face dark with thought. The people shifted. Their anger toward Ethan now mingled with anger toward Kor. The trial had revealed more than strength. It had revealed corruption. And now, the clan could not look away from the truth. Then, one of the oldest elders spoke, his voice like the crack of dry wood. He told of an ancient prophecy, one forgotten by many, whispered only in the deepest ceremonies, a prophecy of a stranger from beyond the stars, a stranger who would rise in a time of division, who would face the betrayal of their own. And through him, the law itself would be tested. Lyra's eyes widened, her breath catching. She remembered the old stories, told to her as a child, of a figure who would come not as conqueror, but as savior. Her gaze fell on Ethan, and for the first time, she wondered if fate had brought him here for more than chance. Perhaps the law had not bound them, it had revealed them. The crowd shifted uneasily, their whispers spreading like fire. Some nodded in awe, others shook their heads in denial, but the prophecy, once spoken, could not be silenced, and in that moment, the meaning of the trial changed forever. Kor roared again, his voice desperate. He shouted that the prophecy was a lie, that Ethan was nothing but a weak outsider. He tried to strike once more, but the elders' spears held firm. The council's leader raised his weapon high, his voice thunderous. The trial is over. The law has been broken. The truth has been revealed. Ethan fell to one knee, his staff slipping from his grasp, his strength nearly gone. Liara rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she touched his shoulder. Her heart swelled with gratitude and fear. For the first time, she did not see him as outsider, but as protector. Not because the law demanded it, but because her heart did. The clan stood divided, but the seed of revelation had been planted. Betrayal had been exposed, prophecy had been remembered. And though Ethan's body was weak, his spirit stood taller than ever. Liara whispered to him softly, so only he could hear, "This is only the beginning, stranger. Your fate and mine are now the same." The sun rose higher, its light spilling across the clearing, and with it came the weight of destiny, pressing upon them all. The sun climbed higher, spilling light over the clearing. The clan stood in silence, their voices hushed, their eyes fixed on Ethan and Liara. The trial was broken, the law was shaken, and the prophecy had been spoken aloud. No one knew what would happen next, not even the council itself. Ethan knelt on the ground, his body aching, his blood soaking his torn clothes. But his eyes remained steady, strong, unyielding. Beside him, Liara supported him, her hand on his shoulder, her silver hair shining in the light. Her heart was torn between fear and hope, for the fate of her people now rested on what he chose to do. The council's leader stepped forward, his face carved with age and wisdom. He raised his spear high, the sun glinting on the metal. His voice rang out, deep and commanding. "The law is sacred, yet today it has been broken. The trial has revealed betrayal, and the prophecy has risen. We must decide." The clan murmured, voices mixing, some calling for Ethan's death, others demanding his honor. The leader's eyes turned to Liara, then to Ethan, his voice sharp. "Human, the law says she is bound to you, but law is not chains, it is choice. What do you claim?" The question hung in the air, heavy as stone. All eyes turned to Ethan, waiting for his answer. He could claim her by law, bind her life to his forever, or he could release her, shattering the oldest tradition of her people. The silence pressed against his chest, harder than the spear of any warrior. Ethan looked at Liara, his breath ragged but steady. She met his gaze, her glowing blue eyes filled with conflict, fear, and something else, something softer. Hidden deep within, he remembered the river, the moment he had pulled her from the water. He had not saved her for reward, not for power, not to own her. He had done it because it was right, and now he knew his answer. He rose slowly to his feet, swaying but unbroken, his voice carried across the clearing, calm, steady. "I claim nothing," he said. Gasps spread through the crowd, voices rising. In shock, Ethan continued, "I did not save her to own her. I did not risk my life for law or prophecy. I saved her because it was right. She belongs to no one but herself." The clan erupted, some shouting in outrage, others falling silent in awe. Never before had anyone rejected the bond of the sacred law. Never before had someone stood against it so openly. The leader of the council raised his hand, commanding silence. His eyes narrowed as he studied Ethan, then softened. "You have broken the chain. Human, yet in breaking it, you have honored it, perhaps more than any of us." Lyra's breath caught, her heart trembling. For the first time in her life, she felt free, not because the law commanded her, but because someone had given her the power of choice. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Then I choose," she said, her words ringing across the clearing. The clan fell silent, waiting. Liara lifted her chin, her eyes shining. "I choose him." The silence shattered into cries of shock, gasps, and whispers. Some shouted against it. Others raised their voices in support. But Liara's words had already shifted the ground beneath their feet. For though the law had been broken, a new truth had taken its place. Not chains, not tradition, but choice, core, bound and guarded by the elders. Snarled with rage, he spat words of hatred, his eyes wild, but no one listened anymore. His betrayal had stripped him of honor. The clan turned their backs to him, their focus on Liara and the human who stood beside her. The council's leader struck his spear into the ground, the sound echoing like thunder. His voice carried across the clearing. Final and absolute. The law is changed. The bond is no longer chains but choice. Today, a new path begins. The clan murmured, some fearful, some hopeful, but none dared to defy. For the prophecy had spoken, and the truth had been revealed. Ethan stood quietly, his chest heaving, his body weak. Liara stood at his side, her eyes soft yet unyielding. Together, they faced the clan, not as master and servant, not as owner and possession, but as equals, as two lives bound by something greater than law. The fire crackled, the sun warmed their faces, and the storm of the night faded into calm. Yet deep inside, Ethan knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The prophecy had named him, the clan had seen him, and the stars above seemed to whisper of more trials to come. Liara felt it too, the weight of destiny pressing against her heart. She looked at Ethan, her voice quiet, almost a promise. Whatever comes next, we face it together. And so, with the river behind them, the fire before them, and the sky vast above, the human and the alien woman stood as one, their bond no longer a law of chains, but a choice of hearts. And in that choice, a new story for both their worlds had begun.